afternoon, everyone. My name is Rohan Murthy, and in case anyone's wondering, Narayana Murthy is not my father. So let's put that to rest. Over 12 years ago, in May 2006, there was an acquaintance of mine who was at the height of his life. He had pretty much everything anyone would desire. He was a fresh PG graduate who graduated with top honors. He had an abundance of friends, saw a situation in his family which was financially struggling until that point, reversed that trend, got a fantastic job offer, and was in fact showered with a lot of praise by numerous people in the industry. He was leaving on a high. By November of 2006, every single piece of good fortune that was on his life was stripped away till he was left with nothing. What I understood from his life and what he sank into is now defined as chronic depression. But more importantly, what I understood also by analyzing his life was the simple fact that a sense of chronic depression was latent within. It was dormant. It was something that became highly aggravated when these situations occurred. From this particular point, what I made as part of my mission was to try and find out how exactly does chronic depression work, how exactly do the symptoms function, and more importantly, how can it be reversed? Because stats have shown today by the World Health Organization that it is the #1 disease that is killing the most amount of young people across the world, especially in the urban community. In fact, more than anything else, the lifestyles that we are reading, the social media statuses that we try to match up to, the one-upmanship, the frenetic pace at which we're moving, the velocity of it all, is in fact taking its toll. We were never designed for this type of living. We were designed for a different way of living, a more harmonious way, a way that was in fact more attuned to the way the human spirit and human body should function. But instead what's happening is that as urban society is in fact growing and expanding, and the sense amongst young people is a strong desire to compete and to try and be different and unique and so on, it's in fact causing immense pressure. There is no conclusion as to what causes chronic depression. In fact, some people might cite stress, some people might cite bipolar disorder, some people might cite neurological diseases that probably give rise to it. But the truth is, depression is the soil from which this poisonous garden of diseases grows from. And tackling chronic depression in the right way is something which is very critical and very key. So, although there have been numerous talks, including TED Talks, including numerous studies about how chronic depression really works, it is from this person's life that I understood that it is something to do with this. He would go to sleep at 9 p.m. on a Friday, only to wake up at 4 p.m. on a Saturday, stay awake for a short while, and then only go back to sleep. His way of hiding. The worst part about chronic depression is many people suffer from it, but it's a sickening disease that tricks you into believing you're the only one. You're alone in this. That this is all that you're worth, this is what you're good for. That hope is a myth, that there is no sense of relief from any of this. And what I understood from another friend of mine who was diagnosed with a life-threatening disease was that he formulated what I have come to term as the building blocks, which can actually help people to raise their life and actually elevate the situation from which they're in. The first one and the most important and critical one is having a dialogue. As chronic depressive people, they tend to close up. They tend to shy away from the world. They tend to implode on the inside. The worst part about depression is that it's like an invisible cancer. You would never treat a person who has cancer or life-threatening illness in the same way. You would never be like, oh, just get over it, it's fine. Just take a little medicine, you'll be okay. You realize that they need not just a lot of medical care, they need a lot of tender love and careness from their family and friends. So we need to learn how exactly that we can sort of help people in that sense. So the first thing is to have a dialogue, to get them to open up and talk about what they're feeling, to be compassionate and patient with them, and to also encourage them that going for counseling is not a shameful thing. That seeking therapeutic help is in fact a way forward. It is the first step. But just stopping over there and throwing some medication at it is not where it should end. It should go to the next phase, which is about knowing one's heart. What my friend did who had the life-threatening illnesses was to keep a journal where he would write down all the triggers that would aggravate his condition. Because the thing about chronic depression is it creeps into you, stays for an extremely long while, feels like it's crushing your heart, and then without warning it suddenly disappears. It's like you have a headache, you take medicine, And it's only later on you realize that, okay, the headache is actually gone. It doesn't announce that it's leaving. So what we need to do is to help people understand what are the trigger points, what are the patterns, what is exactly causing that aggravation to take place. And from there, it leads us to the third point, which is finding a spiritual rocket, what I define as. Now, I'm not trying to advocate for those who may not necessarily believe in organized religion or about finding God, but what I'm trying to say is that finding a way to spiritually uplift yourself. It could be a hobby, it could be dealing with the spiritual arts like pranic healing and Reiki. It could be about finding a certain religious philosophy that does provide you with a sense of upliftment. It could also be about finding what is a true passion for you in order to help you combat what it is that you're feeling. And for us as individuals, it's important to lend our help to those kind of people who are actually going through it. Which brings me to the fourth point, which is breaking a sweat. One of the key things also is that as chronic depressive people, they tend to become very lethargic. They tend to give up on the eating, they tend to give up on a lot of things. They start looking at food and they start feeling, like nauseous. It's simply because their system is starting to decay and corrode inside. And that sense of bringing down their immune system is what allows other diseases to actually creep in. So sometimes we look at me like, oh, they got that disease, or maybe they got cancer, or maybe they got this, that's why they've actually in the state they're in. It's actually not. Chronic depression is actually what is causing it. It severely affects the brain and all the neurological senses which are there. From this particular point, it is about the next one, which is about disrupting one's routine. A key thing to really help someone, a family member, a loved one, or a friend who's actually going through this, to help them to change their routine patterns every day, to try out something new, to actually go for a movie when they actually would probably want to sleep in on a Friday night, to actually want to go out and take part in a particular hobby when they would actually, probably want to just be reclusive in their rooms on a Sunday morning. But to be patient with them. Because sometimes we think we're doing everything, and sometimes it will be like, no, I don't want that. But we need to understand that it's not that they're trying to be difficult. It's just that there's their less help. The final point is about energy. A very dear friend of mine had also told me as I was researching on this and helping many young men who were suffering from this, and where she said, how do you think some people get chronic depression? I said, perhaps due to sadness, perhaps due to a sense of loss of a loved one and so on. She says, no, but more often than not, and this is not a universal truth, it's often because of one's own inability to deal with their own anger. Just like the old cell phone batteries, you guys remember that when you used to leave it charging overnight, the excess power that was going into it would actually start cracking the battery linings to a point where the phone would actually go dead. Whereas with today's smartphones, they actually have the ability to shut off the excess power so the phone doesn't get damaged. Smartphones are like a lot of regular people who have no sense of what depression really is like. The chronic depressive people are like those old cell phones. They have no system or process in place to really shut it down. So to just tell them get over it, it's fine, well, that's why they're depressed in the first place. Because they don't know, the will to live is losing. And which is what leads to the final point, which is the embrace of suicide. It's very easy to say that someone's embracing suicide, that they're being selfish, they're being mean, they're being heartless to their family, they're hurting themselves. But it's the final solution that they feel that they need. Some of them just think about it. They just feel like it's a valve. Now, I'm not condoning it or condemning it, but what I'm saying, it's a valve to get rid of the excess pressure that's there. But being able to channelize that energy correctly and to help them understand, even if they have suicidal thoughts, that it's all right, that they can get better, and that this is a winnable war, is a very critical factor. So having a dialogue, knowing one's heart, breaking a sweat, disrupting the routine, finding a spiritual rocket, and channelizing energy. This is how chronic depression, which I have seen with many young men who have been suffering for many years, can get better and live happier lives. And as to the person I was mentioning right at the start, 12 years ago, as to what he was going through, I can honestly and happily say that he's living a very healthy and very powerful life. How do I know this? Because I see him in the mirror every day. Thank you.